Please welcome moderator, Dr. John Chi.
So our next topic is going to be registries. Is the juice worth the squeeze? So we're all familiar with registries. They've been around for a while. We of course are familiar with things like the Framingham study on cardiac disease, our national cancer databases, orthopedic implant registries, and of course we've gleaned a tremendous amount of information from these sources in terms of trends and associations related to health conditions and procedures. But registries have also always had some issues, and of course we all are familiar with the data quality issue that registries have. So the output is only as good as the input. Oftentimes registries also are limited by the input, and that you only know what to associate things with what you've put into it. So you don't even know about variables that you don't know about unless you know about them. Registries also have some issues with cost, and even the INS these days is kind of contemplating whether to pursue and continue with the Neuropoint Alliance due to cost and feasibility issues. And so there's this conundrum, do we continue to pursue these efforts? How much effort do we put into it? How good is the data we get out of it? But we've also gotten a lot of positive things from it lately. And so we have our two speakers, Dr. Andrew Pugely from Iowa, who also has a master's in healthcare delivery from Dartmouth, who will be arguing that registries have come and gone and it's time to move on. And then Dr. Praveen Mummaneni, or the Big T that I just learned, I like that nickname, will be discussing that registries are in a way our lifeblood, and that all we can do with them is win. So Andrew.
Thank you. All right, I'm Andrew Pugely from the University of Iowa, orthopedic spine surgeon. And I would agree with your last statement, John. Certainly registries have been the lifeblood, but what I'm going to argue today is that, and I have conflicts that aren't really related to this talk, that there's no doubt that registries have been critical to our understanding of current spine issues and spine surgery. Registries are certainly good, but are they the future? And I think to some of the recent events, there's been some cracks in confidence, and that as data becomes more and more prevalent and our techniques to refine that data become more sophisticated, that we need to think maybe beyond registries into something greater, better, and to form a new strategy. So over the last, 10 years, I've certainly noticed that the top three reasons for some failures of registries, they include tremendous fragmentation, high costs, enrollment and data capture barriers, especially in voluntary situations. These negatives, combined with the dramatic rise in the technological advances of artificial intelligence and other ways to kind of mine and refine our data that don't involve physical FTE personnel, should make us rethink what our strategy is and how much money we as spine surgeons and societies and as government are putting into building more and more archaic registries. And just taking a step back, what are our goals as surgeons for our patients? We want to help our patients through evidence-based data to refine surgical techniques, provide them the best care. And certainly we've used data in the past to discover what those are, but we often find ourselves at odds with payers whose motivation isn't necessarily benign, and they often run counter to what we try to do as surgeons and just make money, make margins, deny surgery, and put a tremendous administrative clog within the system. And I think registry is certainly a part of the evolution on a path to quantify what we do to help patients, but I do not think they're the panacea, or at least in their current form. And I think it's time to recognize that we've had tremendous barriers over the last 10 years, and we haven't seen nearly advances that we would expect in through registries as we've seen in other healthcare technologies. And I think now is the time to recognize that the world is continuing to move forward at a very rapid pace, and if we don't recognize this and develop new strategies to deal with data, we might be left behind. And these graphs just depict some of the tremendous changes across the human race. And the bottom one on the right is computing, and how things have just doubled every 1 to 2 years, and in 10 years you're getting 10 times the output. We have an accelerating pace of change from agricultural industrial revolution to what we've experienced in technology that's going from thousands of years, hundreds of years, to now only a few years. And in the next 5 years, I think we're going to be in a very different place with health informatics. And I've been in practice 8 years or so, I've been dealing with registries for about 10, and I've been disappointed with the growth that they've had, despite the rapid rise of technology. And I've been very, I guess, dissuaded by the tremendous regulation through HIPAA, IRB, the big EHR, Epic and Cerner have not been very transparent with their data. And certainly the payers have not been transparent with their data. And, we also have so much scatter among, data collection registries throughout healthcare, from the local level where we collect things to state levels, to enterprise levels, to national, international levels. We've got claims, we've got, actual registries, we've got study groups, and there's just too many databases right now, and we need to figure a way to consolidate, develop a new strategy. We have, obviously, like CMS has its own methods and requirements for payment. Then we have some surgical registries. We've got quality registries through hospitals, and it's just too much. And I think we've reached a breaking point, and we're clearly proven ourselves over the last 10 years that we can't grow without developing a new strategy. And looking back 20 years, like Michael Porter and group explained that we need to measure value, measure outcomes, and build a robust IT platform to handle this universally. And outcomes are certainly the core of this, but we've struggled in, I think certainly it's been apparent in the last 5 years, that these discrete outcomes at 6 weeks, at 3 months, at 6 months are just not enough to prove the value of what we do for patients. And the complexity of the data, this is a recent paper from the WashU group, demonstrated the ability for us to collate data from wearables and other technologies has tremendous value at showing how we make patients improve. And we will struggle to move in its fragmented registries to this kind of outcomes-based surgery without a new strategy. We've also suffered from the big EHR companies not letting us collate information. They've gotten a little bit better at it, and they're moving towards that direction. But look at the difference between some of our databases and study groups of thousands of patients, the 230 million records in Epic, for example, that now they're starting to allow access to. And then, of course, costs have been out of control for a lot of these registries, and certainly the personnel required to comb through the data, to collect the data. It's just not a sustainable model. We recognize that these costs and the fragmentation are just out of control, and the future, is in one's more singular strategy. And with that, like data entry that is voluntary, it just won't be great, and will be very costly, and we'll struggle to get through it. And this is just an example of, we have a very regimented program at University of Iowa where we encourage patients to collect in all these different methods, but we ourselves still struggle. So as I conclude, I would say, where do we go from here? I think it's critical that we develop a new strategy to consolidate out of all these fragmented registries. Is the answer going to be ASR? I don't know. I mean, it certainly could be. We need to define a more aggressive strategy to tackle payers and healthcare vendors, and maybe that's going to be through legislation. Like as recently, there's been some good pre-authorization legislation that's recently passed, and maybe that's also a stronger industry partner with companies that are big data analytics companies that will share transparency. Thank you.
First, I want to thank my fellow and my research analysts for help with this talk. A couple things that Andrew said, which struck me, is that the rate of spine surgery is going up. So if the rate goes up, then how do you control, what is the quality and the cost? You got to start somewhere. So the registries are not perfect, but that's where you start. So I do have disclosures which are here. So basically, what's the advantage of the registry? You got a super large sample size. And are they perfect? They're not perfect. National inpatient sample is not perfect. NSQIP is not perfect. The national inpatient sample has a publicly available all-payer inpatient database. It's retrospective. It's not perfect. It relies on ICD-9 and 10. The data fidelity is not perfect, and there's no imaging in there. So what do we learn from this? I mean, we can move on and talk about other kinds of registries. NSQIP, also retrospective, some missing data elements, only 30 days stuff. But what is the answer? The answer is here. The answer is in spine surgery. And the answer came from joints, actually, because the American Joint Registry has been super effective in collecting data. And now we have a partnership between AANS and AAOS to do the QOD and now the ASR. And we collect all the things that are important to spine surgeons. We collect demographics, HRQOL, We even have the potential to capture radiographic analysis, and some of that is dependent on funding, and it's true, it does cost money. But if you look at the research productivity that's coming out of QOD and the spine core group, this is only with like 500 to 1,000 patients between 500 in lumbar spondy, one diagnosis, up to 5,000 in cervical radic. But just look at what we're learning from that, and that's using machine learning. And what does machine learning really need? Well, machine learning needs to have a very large data set to learn. AI needs a large data set to learn. Andrew's talking about AI. Where's AI going to learn from? AI is not going to learn from, combing through, Epic from like 15 different thousand hospitals. That's not how it's going to learn. It's got to have the data set all in one place. So I stole this slide from Eric Potts' talk earlier today, but here's basically the issue. We get large sample sizes from registries. It's a heterogeneous population. It has research potential. Yeah, that costs money. It can create guidelines because you're using real-world data, and you can influence healthcare policy with this through those guidelines and through the Washington Committee. So it's got a lot of positives to it. And if you just look at what's in the ASR lumbar procedures, 158,000 cases in the lumbar, you have 78,000 cases in the cervical. This is where your AI is going to learn. It's got to learn somewhere. And when you look at these kinds of huge numbers, this is not the 500, the 1,000, the 5,000. We're talking in the hundreds of thousands. And when we get that kind of data, you can do predictive AI. In predictive AI, you got to correlate data and collect patterns of prediction. And for generative AI, you got to, again, have pattern recognition, and you got to learn from the data and create new content. You can't do that without a data set. The registry is your data set. We showed this in this paper that Andrew Chan wrote with the Spine Core Study Group. And you can then use computational models, and you can use cognitive maps, and you start making associations through that kind of large data set. And this one's specific to spine. So they're not perfect. They do cost money, but they have a place to go. This is the old data. You got a fire. What's the fire? We got reoperations. We got complications. How are we going to put out? You got to put it out like he wants to put it out. Put it out with the fire hose. Let's get the fire hose. That's what you need. And so what I can say is it's less costly than prospective data. It's got a large sample size. You can audit it. It does cost money. It's a heterogeneous real-world population, and it's worth the cost. Thanks so much.
All right, so we're going to put it that QR code again, and it's already coming up. I mean, so
it's over.
It's pretty much.
Yes.
As DJ Khaled said, I think all registries and the big P does is win-win-win. So, all right, thank you very much.